And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying,
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted.
Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God.
Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account.
Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
When the choice seems to be to tear down the church
Or build a wall around it,
we aim to walk the narrow road of nuance
through the wilderness between the warring factions,
and try to figure out what it means
to love God
and people well.
All right, so we just got done lying that we were going to record a quick intro and get to what we had planned to discuss, and that didn't happen. So hopefully that is going to result in y'all getting 2 episodes pretty quickly. Taylor, what do you think?
I think that sounds great, and we'll see if it happens.
That's more what I was wondering. Are we actually going to and then it's my turn to edit, so it will be on me if it does not happen. I'll go on and take that off Taylor, since I was a little tough on you at the first of the last one.
I'm used to it. It's fine.
Oh, man. Anything we need to talk about before we get into it?
I think we need to talk about how we're going to get into it.
That's deep.
So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So, as y'all know, we've talked through the Beatitudes for over a year now, trying to eventually get to the ending. And are we there? Like, would this be the end of it?
I think it might be.
I think it could be, because we're right at the end. We're at Matthew 5:10 and 11, kind of go together. I feel like, unless they don't. Maybe we'll talk about that.
I think they do.
I think they do too. I'm glad you're on the same page. So apart from spiritual revelation to us during this podcast that they're not, I think we're about to wrap it up.
How about them apples?
Is it sad, or do you have any feelings about being done with it? Because you probably never have to look at the Beatitudes again after this.
No, I'm glad, because I like it when we can finish things that we start.
Yeah.
Because there's some other things that, by way of format, and that I think we've talked about trying. We'd like to get some guests back in, and it has felt like, well, yeah, but we need to finish this first. So,
Yeah.
And I think it's a worthwhile. These have been worthwhile conversations to have. So I like the idea that they will exist as a kind of, not a body of work, but I'm glad that there will be a sense of completion.
Yeah, and I think there will be other things like this, for sure, that we want to do. We've talked about some different things. Taylor mentioned one thing he'd like to kind of do as a podcast that could even be a series on the last episode. So there will be more of this. It's always nice to kind of talk through something and then dig deeper. We did that with Shepherds and Stages, which we mentioned on the last one. It was a 2-part, maybe 3 now. I don't know if we call that part 3 or just 2.5 or who knows. But then there's also the series we did kind of around deconstruction and just pulling away from the church or God and some of that. So I think that was good to do, just because it allows us to explore and think through different avenues that maybe we wouldn't have gone through originally. I mean, deconstruction's obviously a household topic, I feel like, now, but some of the other things were kind of subtle ways of deconstructing or pulling away or giving up, to put it differently. But yeah. So,
Yeah.
The Beatitudes.
Yes.
I know our intro had them read, but do we want to take a look and read it again?
Yes, let us.
Okay. Do you have it? I have
do.
it if not.
I do
Okay.
have it. This is Matthew 5:10 and 11. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Yeah.
That seems clear. Nothing else to say.
Yeah. So thank y'all for listening to episode 55. Yeah. So there's a lot there, because that's 3 verses. We've been talking through one, which part of me is like, maybe we're cheating by combining, but I don't think so. I think it's like we just want to finish so bad that we're jumping ahead. No, I think this all goes together, and it really captures like that mindset of those verses. You know, it's you're reading through the whole Beatitudes. Blessed are those for, and then it's kind of giving I hate to say a benefit, but how God blesses those who are, living that way. That's why it says blessed are. And then at the end, you read that, and at the end, it's kind of just going back to that, rejoice and be glad, keep the right mindset. And we've talked a lot just about countercultural, which it was back then, but even today, how we just don't live that way.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, when you hear blessed are the persecuted through today's ears here in 2025, how does that sound to the normal person?
I can't help but get past the very selfish and erroneous definition of persecution that is.
I didn't know how long it would take us to get there, but I like it.
Has taken hold culturally, and that it seems that people of faith in America, anyway, that persecution is defined as any time anybody disagrees with you, or when your version of Christianity is not what is in power or culturally accepted or what have you, and that it is a very entrenched kind of retreatist definition of persecution, and that it is then used to justify all kinds of hateful behavior towards everybody who doesn't agree with you. And so, that's what I think of.
Yeah.
Immediately off the top.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point, because, I mean, even if you were to make the case that those things are persecution, which many of them I would say are not, we're just not happy with the outcome, and we're going to call it that so we can be a victim. But it doesn't even just end there. Like, Jesus doesn't say, blessed are the persecuted, period.
Yeah.
It says, blessed are the persecuted for righteousness' sake.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, for the right reason, the ones who are persecuted for a reason that is worth being persecuted for, is the way I read that. It's not about being disliked because you're a certain way or for being rude. It's about being mistreated because you're living rightly before God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that word, I looked into the kind of the linguistics a little bit briefly, and that word being your general state of being right with God.
Mm-hmm.
That being righteousness, and that being expressed through the way that you live.
Yep. Yeah, I'd kind of looked into that too, and it's justice, right relationship, and faithfulness to covenant is one of the things I saw, and I was like, man, that's good. It even commented further. It said it's action-oriented righteousness, living out what is right in God's eyes, not just believing it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's important because, I mean, you had these people during this time who were literally, their goal was just to keep their nose clean, right? So that no one asked questions. It wasn't about truly living righteousness, but it was about saying the right things and making sure other people saw it, in some ways.
So nothing has changed.
Exactly. That's true. I mean, it's not much different. Did you look into persecuted as well?
A little bit, yeah. And it has the connotation of an active pursuit.
Yeah.
An active negative pursuit.
Yep. Pursue, chase down. I looked, in the Old Testament, it's used for hunting down like enemies, like David by Saul was an example.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, whoo, that's kind of makes you look at it different. But it kind of said not just hardship, but being actively opposed for walking in righteousness. Mm-hmm. And I took note of that simply because I think that hardship is often what we call persecution.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes in little things that may be tough. I'm not saying that, but it's not because you're living righteously. Mm-hmm. You're upset. You're didn't get a raise this year. That's not persecution.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks, but it's not persecution.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe it doesn't suck.
Right? We've talked about that a little bit,
Yes.
but for those who may not have listened to some of those episodes, what do you mean?
Maybe an increase in your level of comfort is not what God wants for you.
Yep.
Maybe it
I
is.
think-
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's been, and for our listeners, I mean, y'all know that that's been convicting for me over the years. Is in what ways have I just been trying to pursue comfort rather than pursue Christ?
Well, and I think part of the heart of this is like talking about the misdefinition of persecution. Often that's what we're talking about is you're not being persecuted if you're being made to feel uncomfortable because you are a Christian. That is not persecution.
Mm-hmm.
That should be you should expect that. If you're living against the grain of the world system and against the way of sin and death, you should expect to be uncomfortable pretty often. So that's probably a sign that you're living the way you're supposed to be if you're uncomfortable around other people or around the way that the world works.
And we talked a little bit about mindset on the last episode and even a little bit earlier. I think if we know that, then you live with a mindset that I'm not just suffering for no reason.
Yeah.
Are persecuted for no reason, but there is a purpose in that. Romans 5, 3-5, Romans 5 as a whole really is one of my favorite passages. But I mean, 3-5 basically says that. Therefore, I take joy in my struggles because struggle produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And so like there's a logical step or path that God is leading you on. It's not just, oh, you struggle for no reason. There's a point to it.
Yeah,
and sometimes we forget that, don't we?
Yes, and we have we've also talked about like with hope. If there is no struggle, then you don't need hope because you have everything that you want or everything that you need. And so it is in the tension that those things are put to the test and become useful and become meaningful.
Absolutely. So, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is if I just am persecuted for righteousness' sake, then I'm going to get the raise because then I will be blessed, right?
Yeah. Or you're going to go to the good place when you die.
Right.
I think that's the other thing of into verse 10, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we've talked about this before, but whenever that phrase appears, it's not talking about the place that you go when you die necessarily. I mean, that's part of it. But the rule and reign of God brought to bear in whatever situation. The people of God, his royal representatives, living their lives to his glory in whatever situation they're in. And that is how the rule and reign of Christ comes through his people to earth. And that, yes, there is a future reality where we live in God's presence with everything the way it's supposed to be forever. But this is the now and not yet of the kingdom of heaven, that things have not all been made right, but we bring a little beachhead of heaven with us whenever we are living the way God wants us to be. And so again, it's like, if you're persecuted for the sake of righteousness, if you're treated poorly because you're a Christian, that doesn't mean you get into heaven. That means if you're living the way that heaven wants you to live, basically.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then you're you're probably not on the team.
Yeah. Yep. And I say that I think it's important for us to kind of remember. I mean, we've used the word blessed 8, 9 times now. 9.
Yeah.
That's not about like this fleeting happiness that we often think about.
Well, that
it's
word
deeply rooted in God, you know?
Yeah, we looked up the word when we first started, and it's makarios, I think. And the connotation is somebody spanning a physical distance to somebody else who can't span it. So you're down in a hole. You need somebody to drop a rope to get you out or to extend a hand out to you. And that is the kind of what you should think of when you see this word. And so it is about God and his presence and his closeness, bridging a gap that you can't bridge. It isn't just about an enrichment of your life with the things you enjoy. It's a changing of your life with the things that you can't reach on your own.
Yeah, yeah. And that is I mean, that is a happiness that can exist even with suffering.
Mm-hmm. It's the difference between joy and happiness, really.
Yeah. Yep. So, anything else we need to look at before we proceed
To verse 11?
verse 11, because we've talked through 10 a good bit. We've looked at the words. 11, what would revile maybe be the word to kind of look at closer there?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Depending on what translation you have, you may have "Blessed are you when people hate you."
Yeah, I use ESV, so I do not have that. I've got revile, but yeah, I mean, it's the same. That's a clearer word, right? I mean, that makes a little more sense maybe than revile. Yeah, taunt, insult, reproach. And I hate to try and pronounce Hebrew words because I get them wrong, or even the Greek. The Greek in blessing was way easier to say than Hebrew, but so I think it's karef. I don't know. That's probably pronounced completely wrong, but it says in Hebrew it means to taunt, insult, or reproach, and it's often tied to shaming someone for trusting God. It's used in places like Psalms 42:10. My adversaries taunt me while they say to me all day long, "Where is your God?"
Yeah.
So I mean,
that's
it's
a
not
pretty
just being
strong.
mocked. Like
That's a pretty strong link. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just being mocked. It's being shamed for trusting a God that the world can't see.
Ooh, what a lovely way to put it. What it makes me think of is that story of Elisha, I believe it was, and when the bears came out and mauled all the people. And so a couple brief things. One, these were not children; these were young men in their 20s. That the Hebrew word is not for like little kids. It's for it's for young men. So these bears are not just killing children. Not that it's good, but still. But also like that, what they say to him is "Go up, Baldy," basically.
Yeah.
And "go up" is a Hebrew phrase that means go up to God's house, basically. So anywhere it shows up, pretty much, it's about ascending the mountain of God to the temple in Jerusalem. And so this is what they're doing. They're saying, "Yeah, go to your God, you old timer." Like they're disrespecting the fact that he was a prophet of Yahweh specifically, and that's why bears came out. Not just because they were like, "Yeah, have a hard time getting up that hill, old man." It's they were mocking his worship of God in the same way that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what's so powerful about the Beatitudes as a whole. I mean, all of it is Jesus flipping the cultural script, and he's basically saying like, "Hey, when the world is chasing and mocking and excluding you for living in line with like me and my justice, guess what? You're on the right track."
Yeah.
But that's not how the world sees it.
No. And also none of this is stuff that we like. Falsely say all kinds of evil against you. Nobody likes that. It's hard not to respond. I think the thing to remember, though, is that this exact same thing happens to him later when he is crucified. And happened to him a lot. Like the Pharisees and Sadducees and teachers of the law were saying things like, "Oh, it's only because of demons that he's able to cast demons out. It's because he's on their team," or he's saying we shouldn't follow the law of Moses. All these really untrue and in their culture very hateful, shameful things. And how does he respond? He doesn't get well. Sometimes he gets angry, but he doesn't get hot angry, like he doesn't respond because he's personally offended. How dare you say this about me? The times he gets mad is when God is disrespected and when God's law and God's truth are disrespected and reviled. And his whole thing in Matthew 23, I think the 7 woes is like, what I'm mad about is that you guys say that you're God's chosen and you're living in opposition to everything that he stands for. And you've ignored everything that the Torah and the prophets were built on.
Yeah.
I think that this mirrors it nicely, actually, and we'll get to the prophets bit in a minute, but just like he really lays it out that you guys are the evil people this passage is talking about, basically.
Yeah. And so that's, I mean, how do you see that more today? I mean, I don't hear much about demons today. Not that they're not out there. We just don't talk about it, right?
Yeah.
But how do you see this going on in our day and age?
I see it
phrase.
In lots of ways. One thing I do want to mention before I get into that is that last line of verse 11 is "because of me." So this isn't somebody reacting to you and you being a jerk or you being self-righteous or whatever. This is like fundamentally they are doing these things because you follow Christ, not because you say you're a Christian, not because of your church or whatever. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, the world hates the Lord and is going to respond to that. That is
Yeah.
a different thing than cultural pressure against Christianity or political or societal rejection of this or that point of theology. This is like down at the bedrock. Your sin nature hates God. The enemy hates God. And that's where it's coming from. That's a different thing.
Let's sit in that for a while then.
Okay.
'Cause I'm glad you called that out. I do think you have to make that distinction between someone who simply says, "Oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I was saved when I was 7."
Mm-hmm.
Just that's how old I was when I came to knowledge of God as my Savior. So I'll use that so it's on me and not someone else. So and that's kind of what you see. And maybe they go to church. Maybe they're involved in even leadership roles. But, I mean, what you're saying and what I'm reading here, mine says on my account, but is that there is a difference between that and someone who's truly following Jesus, who's truly on this path to righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we just lump it in as, oh, well, anyone who's going to church or calls themselves a Christian. And there's a lot of people who call themselves Christian that at the end of time, they're going to stand before God and he's going to say, "Depart from me, I never knew you," right?
Yeah.
And so there's a clear distinction here on those who are pursuing God and his blessings to talk through kind of what we're looking at here, as opposed to those who liked having that name of God behind them in what they do, because, there's some benefit with it, but they're not truly pursuing the blessings of God. They're pursuing the blessings of the world.
Yeah. And I think that's the more obvious one. I think there's a second thing that happens in which people who are following God allow themselves to be distracted by other issues. And so I think this gets into the thing you asked a minute ago, which is what are examples of this?
Yeah.
The things I think of are they're really important issues that we have trouble parsing, but we are so ready to be so dismissive and even hateful towards the people who don't agree with us. So, if you're not, if you're not Reformed, you're not a Christian, or if you are okay with LGBT, you're not a Christian, or you're backslidden or whatever, or if you don't vote this way, or if if you're cool with illegal immigration, then it's those things I see people say, and that when people disagree with them, they say they're being persecuted. Like, oh, our society is embracing omnisexuality, so the traditional way of life and marriage is under attack, and therefore I am personally under attack. Now, there's some truth to that, for example, but it's like, are they saying evil about you because of God or because of how strident you're being with your perspective? Maybe I'm not getting at the heart of it properly. But
I
I
get
guess
what you're saying.
I guess what I mean is, like, I've heard a lot of people who I believe are following Christ get so passionate about those things and will say things like, if you think this, I just don't want anything to do with you. Like, take me off your friends lists, miss me with that. I can't understand how you can be a Christian and think this thing. And these are people I know, or at least as far as I know, are believers. But it's like, that's different than, I feel like there's a distinction there, kind of like we were talking about a minute ago.
Well, there's a what you believe and then what do you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Is the way I kind of look at some of that. Because I think a lot of what you have said, well, there's people saying this wrong. I mean, a lot of it I would say is wrong. Now, to your point, do I go out and scream at those people? No. I don't think that's the fix, right? I think, Jesus was relational, and I think we're supposed to follow that model and try to relate with people. And sure, there's opportunities to say things on a greater scale, like even what we're reflecting on here, the Beatitudes were a little bit of a bigger scale than him going to the well and talking with a woman. So there's room for both of it, but how are you going about that?
Mm-hmm.
Is it screaming at people, or is it trying to talk about who God is, and what He's done? And I think that's different. Now, to your point, it's taking that as persecution if I say, hey, these LGBTQ plus, I'm not current with the acronym, so apologies. But these issues are sinful. These people are okay with it, so I'm being persecuted against. Well, no, we know the world is going to be against us. But is that actual persecution? I think it's kind of what you're getting at, right? Or am I missing it too?
Yeah, it just, I think on the other side of it, I've heard people say, like, if you do accept any kind of, if you don't accept any kind of sexuality or gender identity, that's not love, and you're being unloving. And how can you do that and call yourself a follower of Jesus? That, or it's like if you say you care about people, but people who immigrate to this country are treated really, really poorly, and people who are not white are treated really, really poorly. What are y'all doing about that? It doesn't, like, there's an awful lot in the Old Testament about welcoming the foreigner and welcoming those who are marginalized and oppressed. So what are y'all doing with that? And a lot of that is what Jesus echoes in Matthew 23. But at the same time is like, so we have a current political administration that is of a particular persuasion, and there are a lot of things that administration is doing. Does that mean that the way of Jesus is being straight up persecuted because of what may or may not be the law of the land? Does that mean that you are being persecuted? Yeah. And it's just, it seems like we take anything that doesn't line up with our lens of faith as persecution. And I think there's a distinction between, in this world you will have trouble, and you are being persecuted because of Christ. Some of this stuff is just like, this is just life under the sun, man. People are not going to agree with you. They're not always going to treat you well, and the thing that makes you the most comfortable is not going to be the law of the land. That doesn't mean you're being persecuted. So
I have a question.
Yes.
And I agree. I'm with you on what you're saying. This just popped into my head. Because I am of the mindset that no political administration is truly looking for Christ.
They're
looking for power. And
for sure.
There are things sometimes that are done subtly, and they're maybe not so subtly, that it's like, man, is this an attack at... Yeah. So, like, under the Biden administration, they proclaimed Transgender Day of Visibility. Mm-hmm. You know about this? You know what day they picked to proclaim that on? On Easter.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, okay, was Easter or Good Friday? I don't know. I'd have to look back. So I'm not lying.
It was chosen on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it, right?
Yeah.
It was Easter, and it's like, okay, is that? And again, maybe not persecution, but is that an attack at, or a lash out at Christianity? Mm-hmm. That seems weird.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and let's say that it is. What then should be our response? Should we get angry at those people, or should we see it for what it potentially is, which is a move from spiritual evil to try and push on a boundary there, which we should expect?
Yeah.
Like, does me personally being offended by that help the cause of the kingdom? Because I agree. I remember seeing that and being like, ooh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Like, definitely making a statement. How then should we respond?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's easy when it's not your person in office that's doing it. And I say your person, I mean that not the side that you more closely connect with. Because, I mean, there are certain ways I believe, based on my beliefs, that tend to line up with another. That doesn't mean I'm saying either one is right. I don't think we should ever expect the American government to be any different than like the Roman government was. I mean,
and it isn't.
You know, like it's there for its power, and it'll do with Jesus whatever it needs to stay in power.
Ooh, buddy. Whew. Yeah.
And I think that's what you're seeing. So on the left, well, it's how do we cater to this group?
Yeah.
As much as possible, regardless what it means. And on the right, same thing. I mean, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear until it's time to put up or shut up, and then, oh, well, we can't do this right now.
Yeah. And I think that we talk about politics a lot just because
Which we said we weren't going to,
Well.
and it happens, right? It's just part of it.
You can't ignore it because I think it's just about the biggest idol we have in our society. I think it's in top 3 or 4 for sure, and because it is so often substituted for authentic faith.
Yeah.
Is the reason we end up talking about it a lot. And we have seen so many of our peers and ourselves at times really pulled into that riptide of my identity as a Christian is inextricable from my identity politically as a citizen of this or that country or party or political ideology or whatever. And, there's only one king. And he doesn't share power in that way, Like we are citizens of some other place, and we are at war with the world systems that seek to elevate and exalt themselves over Christ, and to, as you said, to use Christ as a ploy to deceive people into putting our allegiance in the wrong place.
Yeah, and it's tough because, there's some thoughts I'm putting together. Taylor and I were talking about this earlier. And I may have alluded to it on the last one, I don't remember, but I would like to write a book someday. So I've started 3 because maybe one will get done at some point. And now that I say it on here, maybe there's some accountability that I have to at least get one of them done. But one of them is just focused around community and the places we look for it that are wrong sometimes. I mean, we are created for community. The problem comes in when we start looking for it in places like politics or heck, even sports, like these things that may not be bad completely. I think there are some aspects that we could argue, but we start looking for that instead of community in Christ. Now, I'm not saying we find community in Christ and stay there in our bubble. That's not what he asks us to do, but he does ask us to as a church, reach people. And I think often it's easier for us to hitch our cart to these bandwagons, or I don't even know what I just said, horse to these bandwagons, whatever the phrase is, and go with it because it's there and people are loud about it. And, it helps you in conversation. Well, I don't know that God's asking us to be so concerned with that other than when it does go against who he is, back to the scripture. Yeah.
And I think part of what we're talking about is that this false or this, improperly defined persecution is about like, this gives me an enemy, which means that I have the same enemy as this other group of people, and I can derive an identity from that. But it's still an identity in something other than Christ.
Yeah. And I think, to be fair, I do think it's right with what we were talking about earlier. The same way politics will utilize Jesus however they need to, I think they utilize the family structure. So I do think I've seen breakdown of the family structure over years. I'm reading a book about it, and it's devastating the way we've become so focused on other things instead of our families. Like there's a clear line of what it's done to the family structure. But what do we do with that? Okay, they're attacking the families. Sure. Do I just scream about it and say they're persecuting me, or do I spend time actually focusing on my family so I'm making sure that doesn't happen within my line?
It's a positive response rather than a negative one, in the sense that, like, because the other thing I've seen is like, well, we need to pass this law, or we need to elect these people, or it becomes about fighting against one thing rather than fighting for another thing. Because whatever the law of the land, whatever is societally acceptable or celebrated, what will always be true is like you can love God and love your neighbor, and here's how you do that. Yeah. And they even if that's made illegal, that doesn't change what the calling is. Whatever your society or your country or your government thinks about what a family should look like, we know what the call of God is for what a family should look like, and we can be working on that. Like you said, we can be investing in the right things and not just fighting against the wrong things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's one of those things where you can find anything you want to out there, right?
Yep.
And so it's like, what are you allowing to pour into you? Am I sitting and watching sermons and videos about, screaming about what's going on? Or am I watching stuff about biblical manhood and being the leader of my family? And goodness, I came across, or a friend shared with me, Paul Washer's this 3-part series on biblical man, and it's just fascinating. And it talks about some of the breakdown of of the family structure. So it's part of it, but it's, again, what do you do with that, and how do I make sure I'm being who I'm supposed to be as a man of God?
Yeah.
So I think we've talked a little bit about what persecution is not.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we think it is in today's age? If it's not those things, where are you seeing it? Where it's like, actually, yeah. And is it in America? Is it that you're seeing it in America, or you're seeing it other places?
So this is interesting because I think it ties into verse 12, because most of the persecution, not most, much of the persecution in Scripture and that we see in America is coming from religious people. So the last verse here, rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Well, who's they? Right? Who are the ones who persecuted the prophets in the Old Testament? It was the religious leaders. It was the kings of Israel, and it was the priests, and it was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It was the empowered religious structure of the society who knew what they were supposed to do and didn't do it, and didn't want to hear the voice of the prophets holding them accountable for their sin and for their apathy and for their addiction to comfort and all these things. And in America, there is that thing of like, it certainly does happen that the world, those who do not follow Jesus, see the way of Jesus and they hate it and they respond to it. That most certainly does happen. I think the more insidious thing, and the thing that happens that I've seen personally more often, is religious people fighting against the way of Jesus and shaming, shunning, excommunicating, being hateful, and otherwise sabotaging the lives of those who are trying to walk the thin line of faith. Certainly the kind of industrialized church structure in America chews up believers and spits them out. I mean, how many people do we know who have been systematically hurt by church? Not just somebody I go to church with was mean to me, but like, this is operating on principles that are contrary to the gospel, and it's harming people. So I think that has to be a part of the conversation, because that is the one that maybe either doesn't get talked about as much or gets talked about in different ways and not called what it is. What's your response to that?
That's a good question.
We'll find out.
Yes, I do. I don't disagree with that. I think it's tough because I'm trying to kind of go back and forth on what is and what is not persecution.
Mm-hmm.
Someone saying I'm wrong for saying something's a sin. I wouldn't say that's persecution in any way, form, or fashion. Right? I'm doing what I'm supposed to. Now, I do think there's the why am I doing it?
Mm-hmm.
To be a jerk or to boldly proclaim who God is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to make sure to mention that first. Because I do think some of those things we are supposed to speak out about. Now, where? Is that within your community, which we were talking about earlier? Or am I supposed to go stand on the corner of a street or a roundabout, depending on where you live, and with a megaphone and scream? And I just don't know that that's the answer. I don't see that done well almost ever. And so I don't think that's it. As far as that goes, I do think I've seen people who are speaking rightly against those issues and for the sake of the kingdom, not for the sake of being a jerk, who are ridiculed. So I think that does happen some. I don't think it would be fair of them to say, of anyone just to say, oh, well, I said this and someone unfollowed me or unsubscribed to the podcast, so I'm being persecuted. Well, no, that's I don't think that's persecution. But I do think there are people who are trying to boldly speak who God is, who are persecuted in ways more so than that.
Let me put some more flesh on this, and maybe it'll make more sense. So we both grew up in the South, grew up in church. And the kind of thing I'm talking about is the kind of thing that Jesus encountered with the Pharisees, where he was
Yes.
he was teaching the truth and trying to get back to the heart of the Torah, and they just didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And the whole
yeah.
like, oh, that one family of big givers isn't going to like that sermon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or that youth pastor is bringing in some rough kids. We don't want them in here. Or it's that thing of like,
Yes.
we have our nice, comfy church thing going on, and we don't want Jesus to mess it up.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you said that, because that's where I was about to go. I wanted to say that and then shift, and I was going to try and say what I heard you saying, which you just said for me perfectly. So
Okay.
I do think there is some of that too. I wanted to make the comment because I felt like we were almost saying, if you're preaching those things and someone's coming at you, that's not persecution. And in general, yes, I don't think so most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But though I do see people standing up for God, not just for their political system or whoever, in a way that is probably pretty close to how it should be done, and being ridiculed for it.
Well, I
now,
remember,
to your point, sometimes even pastors being ousted because the church, I mean, this kind of goes back to your point, church didn't like what they said. Well, maybe what they said was right.
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly.
But it doesn't allow you to live, to use the word we used earlier, comfortably, the way you have and the way you want to. It doesn't allow you to keep your thing up top, or to be elevated the way you want to. And so we can't have that, right? A lot of Jesus' teaching, if we really looked at it and actually preached it in the church today, would not be popular.
Yeah. I think that phrase, because of me or on my account.
Yes. Yeah.
Not this theological camp or this denomination or this church or even this religion. It's because of Christ.
It's back to the heart of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the measure of it. I remember a few years ago, Bernie Sanders coming out and saying like he heard Christianity described, or like the gospel, basically, like you're saved from something that you did. And he's like, I just don't know that that's a good thing to believe. That to me is much more, you're saying that fundamentally you think to believe this is harmful and hateful. That is more in which I don't know the guy. I don't know what he was trying to say. But it's like,
mittens.
Yeah, you're questioning something fundamental that God says is true about the world.
Yeah.
And you're coming at that. You're not coming at me and how I'm handling myself or whatever. You're saying, I think that's a bad way to live, and I think you're a bad person because of it.
Yeah. Well, 'cause, I mean, those are the kind of thoughts that eventually become more,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because then it's, well, we got to do something about it. I mean, there's this story about and I'm going to get all the facts wrong, but there was a lawmaker in Minnesota who was killed. Someone went into their home and killed her and her husband. And I don't know what has come out since. One of the things I saw, it was because it was party line stuff dealing with, goodness, I hate to say anything because I'm going to be wrong. But anyway, it's no death is great, right? But I mean, it's someone who just disagreed, and that was their lash out. And I don't know that was a biblical lash out. They may say it was, but that can't be I don't know. I think in so many ways we just want our government to legislate morality, and that's just not going to happen. I don't think it's supposed to necessarily.
I don't even think we want.
It's so tough.
I don't even think we want that. I think we want it to punish the people that we don't like and reward us.
Maybe, yeah.
Not in every case, obviously, but I think that's what's lurking behind a lot of this zeal.
Well, there's the thing of like, if you've convinced yourself so heavily that you're right about everything or most things, there's no way you're ever going to go to the middle at all.
Well, and you can justify whatever reaction you want because you're on the right side.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
This is potentially a whole other can of worms, but I see a lot of people on the left being like the whole punch a Nazi thing. What's your only response to Nazis? Punch them in the face. Like, well, that kind of didn't solve the problem the first time around, did it? I see what you're saying. It's not good to be a Nazi. However, are they any less Nazi after they get punched in the face? You haven't responded with a better idea than being a Nazi. All you've done is been violent toward the idea you don't like. Have we solved the problem?
Yeah.
It's just lashing out in rightness. There was only one guy that ever had a right to do that, and he chose not to.
Yeah.
Instead, he died for the people that he had the right to lash out at, so that they could have a relationship with him and be saved from all the evil that was destroying their lives.
Yeah. I was trying to find this story, so I didn't say something wrong. So it's abortion rights supporters that he was going and basically offing. It's tough when we get to the point where we're like, this makes sense to do.
Yeah.
Because that is persecuting. Now, I think abortion's horrible. I disagree with it 100%. But does that mean I should go out and make a list and start getting rid of the people who don't agree with that? Well, no. Especially if I believe what God says about the world we're in. Yeah, I think we do a great job sometimes of saying what's wrong and what we're against, but a bad job of doing the Christian thing about it.
Yeah.
And I think if we're doing the great job yelling about it and are persecuted, probably not persecution. Let me rephrase that. Someone's angry with us, it's probably not persecution.
Yeah.
Now, if we're going about it a biblical way, rightly pointing to God, and are persecuted because we're on the right path, back to what we talked about earlier, then sure. There's a lot here.
There is. And even at that, what is our response supposed to be? Rejoice and be glad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know how much rejoicing and being glad I've seen in response to real persecution, at least in our society.
And I'm of the mindset that much of, again, we've already talked about the label persecution, so I don't think much of what we call persecution is actually persecution, but I also don't think a whole lot of persecution happens within the United States. I think you see it in great ways elsewhere, not necessarily always for who God is and the sake of his kingdom. You see persecution that's completely unfounded. But there's a quote that I wish I could find. I'm gonna try to. I thought it was John Stott originally, but it may not be. But what he said was, the church is not persecuted today so much as ignored. Its revolutionary message has been reduced to a toothless creed of bourgeois suburbanites. It is not persecuted because, frankly, there is nothing to persecute.
That's got some teeth.
Yeah, and it's just like, I don't know, I think we've reduced ourselves to calling things persecution that aren't because it doesn't exist anywhere else. And part of it's because I think there are very few people truly following and living the way God asks us to live.
Well, if we can redefine persecution, then we can let ourselves off the hook for that.
Yeah, because guess what? I said something and someone didn't like it. In fact, they commented on my Facebook post. They
called me a
thumbs
name.
downed it. They unfollowed me. And it's like, man, if we were worried about following Jesus instead of building our own Facebook followers list, like these things would not matter so much to us.
Yeah. And somewhere way beyond at the back of that is rejoice and be glad.
Yeah. But with true persecution, right? Like,
yeah.
Because if you're calling that persecution and being glad because of that, well, who cares? You're just glad you made someone mad.
Well, the point I'm making is, like, people are not rejoicing and being glad. They're getting mad and then trying to justify their ugly response.
Yeah.
Or justify not engaging really with whatever that person is saying.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting how quickly a certain side will come out at anything that bears the name Christian. I mean, I even look at, like, heck, the Duck Dynasty show. Was so hated by certain groups of people. And even if it's not your thing, like, it was funny. there was good stuff behind it, like good lessons learned. Heck, it's something my kids can watch and me not have to be worried about what I have to mute or turn off or cover eyes. And but because it was attached to people who were labeled as Christians, we're going to come at it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't know if that's persecution, but I do think it's interesting how things have shaped so much to like hate anything with the name. And is it because the name has little meaning behind it anymore? I mean, you kind of have to think about that. Is that why we're not being persecuted? Because the term Christian really doesn't mean much, except for the fact that maybe you identify with this set of beliefs. I don't generally use that term often. I mean, if you were to ask me if I was a Christian, I would say yes, but I typically like to say I'm a follower of Christ, just because of what that term, even that one, you know, aside with persecution, what that's become. And maybe I'm rumbling now, but
Rumbling or rambling?
both. It's a mix of mumbling and
It is
rambling.
past lunchtime.
That's right.
Well, and I think of some of the studies that the Barna Group has done. They have a book called Unchristian. They did a lot of survey research about people's perception of Christians, and a lot of the words that came up would be like judgmental, unloving, too political. And I think part of it is like, part of the reason people react to things they perceive as Christian is because of the impression they have of Christians. Probably one that's been, unfortunately, well earned.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like when people, I think we talked some about with Josh Porter about this, when people come out like, oh, I don't like Christians, like, I'm kind of with you, depending on what your definition is. If your definition of Christian is, an unloving, harsh, judgmental, condemning person, like, I agree. I'm not down with those people because that's not what Christ is like.
Yeah. Well, and I do think, I mean, we've even talked about how this is like a roadmap almost in many ways, like where you're going from one thing to the next thing. And then, hey, as you get these, you can understand the next thing, whether intentional or not. I don't know, but I do think it's interesting that as we get to the end of it, it's almost like, hey, if you're doing all these things, you're going to be persecuted and hated.
Yeah.
And and there's both words used. I think it's easy to pick on the persecute, but the next one is, when others revile. I mean, like that's even different. When others hate you and persecute you. So there's maybe something to that we should have picked up on a little earlier, or we talked about it. But it's not just persecute; it's and revile. But if you're doing those things, like you should be so different to what the rest of the world looks like. Not because you're putting on a bow tie and walking around waving a Bible, but because you are living in contrast to the way the rest of the world does. Yeah. In such a way that people are just going to think, like, you're ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm looking back through this list and pondering the conversations we've had about, like, the world hates this and the church hates this too. The church in the terms of, like, the institutionalized
religious people.
Yeah, the religious structure. Like, we don't have mercy. Who cares if you're pure in heart? No, we're not going to make peace. We're at war. Look, gentle? No, we got to be strong and stand up for the right.
Yeah.
Mourn? No, we don't have time to. Yeah, like that list doesn't play for either of those groups of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I don't know. I think it would be tough for us to ever say we're being persecuted if we can't look through that verse and say, that passage and say, yeah, I'm doing all these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can't say, yeah, I'm living, like most people think I'm odd. Not because, again, I'm doing something that should be perceived as odd necessarily, but because I'm so focused on these things that I don't have time to sit and complain about politics or to sit and worry about whatever.
Yeah. I mean, before we started recording, we were talking about business because we both work in that sphere. And talking about, hey, there's a lot of things that are just normal, that are expected, that are not cool and not okay. Ways of doing business and treating people and thinking about
for
money.
For the sake of profit.
Yeah, and success and all this. And it's just, and we both, not to pump us up, but like, that's not the way either of us do business in our respective careers, and not the kind of environment we try to create for the people we work with. And that sometimes is weird because it's in contrast, hopefully it should be, to what passes for business as usual around us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, you've kind of got to say, okay, I'm okay with this, and just, I would say, compromise your beliefs, or, you know, I'm
Yeah.
going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not mean you scream, because if you scream and get fired, well, you're probably not going to make much change there anyway, right? But
Well, how can you scream when you're rejoicing and being glad?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe if you ask me on the right day, I can give you a reason. But
I think it's just, this whole list is a list of contrasts. You have heard this, I tell you this, kind of thing. And it is counterintuitive to rejoice and be glad when you are being treated poorly in whatever way. That seems backwards. But the kingdom of God is kind of backwards in a good way, in the best way.
in such a way that we should be able to say, you know what, I need to live in a way that I'm going to be persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem like the right thing to say, but that's what we should be doing. We should be poor in spirit, and we should mourn. We should be meek, hunger and thirst for righteousness. You know, be merciful, pure in heart, be a peacemaker, and because of that, because of who we are, be persecuted. Mm-hmm. Not just because you want to be persecuted and play victim, but because you're doing the right things that reflect God and His righteousness. And if you're on that path and persecuted, then maybe you're doing the right thing.
And as you say, talking about Romans 5, knowing that this produces endurance and hope, we can rejoice and we can be glad.
Yep. Yep. Man, so did we just make it through the Beatitudes?
I think we did.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I think I mentioned this to you at one point. We're through the Beatitudes, but I don't know if we're through with Matthew 5. Because there is this whole salt and light thing that's also kind of should be challenging to the way we live our lives. But that may be for a different series.
I think that's for a different conversation for a different day.
Yeah. It is. Well, thank y'all for listening. And it only took us how long to get through the Beatitudes?
Like 11 months or something.
Yeah. It took a minute. And again, that's us. But we are trying. I did want to look back. Let me just see. The first episode that we recorded.
Wait for it.
Of the Beatitudes, not overall, was 7/25/23. Was collateral damage the casualty of the Beatitudes?
So yeah, 11 months.
No. 23.
Oh. Whoops.
So thank y'all for hanging on for not quite 2 years. We did get through it, and we recorded other episodes during that time.
Yeah.
With you. But I know it was a long journey, but those who have hung on and not unsubscribed from us and persecuted us, thank y'all.
We can rejoice and be glad now
about that. Yeah. All right. Anything you want to say to people before we?
Thank you. More to come. Hopefully quicker than we're used to.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, y'all.